Good afternoon. I'm with Cascadia Minerals CEO Graham Downs and VP of Corporate Development Andrew Carne. The symbol for Cascadia is CAM, C-A-M, on the TSX venture. Graham, it's been a little bit since we last spoke. How are things?
Well, I think since we last met, the big thing is that we acquired Granite Creek Copper, and it's Carmacks copper gold deposit, which is in central Yukon, just west of the town of Carmacks, which is in central Yukon. It has a really nice foundational copper gold deposit, 651 million pounds of copper, over 300,000 ounces of gold. And yeah, it's we think we can make this much bigger. It's the Yukon, as you probably know, the Yukon is it's a hot jurisdiction right now. It's a safe jurisdiction, and I believe these type of deposits are quite rare in North America. So we're very fortunate to have it. So that's the newest thing that's happened with us. We've just raised a bunch of money, and we're fully funded for a much 15,000 meter program in 2026. So we just received our permits. So we have a decade of runway for permits. So we're in a really good position right now.
All right. So the Carmacks property, tell us about that for those who haven't seen this project in the past.
You bet. Yeah, it's kind of been overlooked for a long time. I think the biggest reason is for decades, it's really been looked at as the companies have gone after the oxide, the upper near surface portion of this deposit, which is made up of 3 zones, to the point where they actually got it permitted. Didn't get the water license at that time, but they got it permitted, cleared the heap leach for it. So it's kind of a brownfield area. But it never got off the ground, and then it wasn't until recent years that the land package was consolidated and Granite Creek was doing the right thing and going after the sulfide portion, which is metallurgically much easier to get out. And so yeah, there's a lot of potential. It's just been overlooked for years and then underfunded. Obviously, we're just into better markets these days and better copper gold prices. So it's just been flying under the radar for a long time. And I mean, Andrew and I have been working up in the Yukon for decades. Everyone in the Yukon knows about it, but not a lot of people know about it in North America, around the world. So
yeah, when I look at the resource, I see copper, gold, and silver. I don't see lead and zinc. But when I look at the grades of the resource, it looks to me like this is a VMS, but it's not a VMS, right?
Why don't I? Yeah. I'm just going to skip forward here so that folks can see the resource here. We've got it highlighted there. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like it's a bit of an oddity. We've got that 36 million tons of 0.8% copper, 0.26 gold, and some silver. There's a bit of moly in this as well. We don't have it listed there, but it is a component of the resource. And ultimately, that gets us to that 1% copper equivalent grade. And it's a weird deposit. The prevailing style of deposit, it's called, is Minto type, referencing the Minto mine to the north. And it's never great when you just refer to one other project, but fundamentally what it's thought to be is a metamorphosed porphyry. And Minto's thought to be of the similar thing. There's a couple other analogs elsewhere in the world, but really these are kind of in their own interesting little belt of mineralization. It's called the Minto copper belt here, extending from Minto down to around the Carmacks zone there. And so they're thought to be metamorphosed porphyries where, you've had emplacement of an alkalic porphyry like you would in northern BC, but then subsequently there's been a process that's metamorphosed that fundamentally concentrating grades. You're seeing higher grades than you'd typically see in, northern BC style porphyry, but they're over smaller widths. So, in shape and in size, it's a bit VMS-like, but from a depositional model perspective, it's not a VMS.
And importantly, the grade is quite good. I mean, you can see on that slide, you're getting 105 meters of just under 1% copper. And then, we drilled 83 meters of 0.9% copper this year. But within that, you get, 25 meters of 1.5% copper. So you're getting really nice grades here close to surface. The way that this deposit is right now is envisioned as open pit, but we haven't found the bottom of it yet. So like Andrew said, it is kind of VMS-y in size and shape and geometry. But the grade is quite good.
So the first thing I notice when I look at sort of the long section, which I guess is slide 9 in your presentation, it looks like there's 3 deposits separated by some gaps that are, I don't know, 100 or 200 meters apart, but maybe there's ability to fill in some of those gaps. But, you know, is this envisioned to be one giant open pit, or is this where there's like going to be a starter pit and then you work your way to the other parts of the, you know, deposit?
So when this was last studied from a mining perspective was 2023, and that's where these pit shapes that you see come from. They did a PEA. They demonstrated that, you know, it is economic as currently shaped at much lower copper and gold prices than we see currently. But that was based on the available resource at the time, which, as you point out, you know, is kind of these 3 distinct zones. The history of this project, though, is that a lot of the work really focused on this oxide, where you see the red there. You know, you can see the density of drilling in these upper oxide areas is quite substantial. That was a lot of focus of the work in the 1990s, early 2000s. Took this thing actually to permitting for an oxide heap leach, never built it. But what it means is the sulfide underneath it has seen much, much less drilling. And you can really see that in this figure. Where, you know, you get into that blue area, the sulfide, and the drilling really drops off. But what is there is carrying really good grade. So it means that there hasn't been proper targeting on this project to evaluate the potential for more sulfide mineralization. And I think that's where you start seeing the ability to connect the dots on some of these areas. I'm just going to go back to a plan view here, because I think this really shows some of the potential. The 147 and the 1213 are some of the older known zones. The 2000 is relatively recent compared to the rest of them. And what's interesting here is you can see, you know, historically, the 147, the thinking was, you know, it just kind of continues linearly along here. But it looks like the 2000's actually been offset, post-mineral faulting, something of that nature, which has, you know, shifted it kind of off of that plane of mineralization a little bit down here. So when they did all this drilling to try and fill in the gap here, didn't hit anything because there's been this offsetting going on. Granite Creek, the previous owners, did a lot of IP here in the 2022 era, did a little bit of work to start testing some of these new zones in 2024. And they tested this, what they call the gap zone, which is exactly that, you know, trying to connect the dots here. They put 4 holes into it in 2024, and they did start hitting sulfide mineralization. But it seemed very, very little work. So I think that's the answer. There's an ability to connect the dots to some extent here. There is going to be some offsets in that mineralization, but it really just needs more work. It needs more drilling to properly understand it.
And if I might add, I'm sure Andrew was going to go here, but I mean, just going back to the point that historically when other groups were working on this, when they hit sulfide, they would actually just stop drilling. If you look down at zone 14, which is just around 400 meters to the east of 1213 zone, it's a perfect example. We were talking to the ex-Yukon Geological Survey gentleman that worked out there, and he's like, you got to go back out to zone 14. Like we hit 16 meters of percent copper, and we just walked away due to the sulfide. Haven't seen a follow-up hole. So what you have is the fabric of the Minto belt that kind of goes up from, you know, in that orientation, southeast to northwest, and you're seeing parallel zones, just like up in Minto, and you're seeing that in the gap zone. Another hole, the gap zone was a large intersection, 0.5% copper, which is quite good. You get that in your surface, that's great. Should get pulled into a pit. So I don't know. There's a lot of room. It just hasn't seen the drilling. And Granite Creek got things going in the right direction. It's just that they were underfunded, because even 3 years ago, markets were completely different. So we're in a much better position here, and a lot of exploration potential to build resources just in the deposit area, let alone these parallel things like zone 14 or the gap zone. And we still need to do a lot of geophysics, because this mineralization lights up because you have such a contrast from the barren granite around it, and then you this really nice conductive core. I mean, I think we've got pictures of the core. You should see this stuff. It's beautiful.
Where is zone 14, Graham? I don't see it on the map.
Yeah, it's just
right down here. It's just this single hole that you see here.
Okay, I see. It's
so
okay. So it's one drill hole.
Yeah, it was.
Just
There was
never
an
followed
IP
up.
section running kind of along here across the zone, and there's an IP anomaly. They drilled it in 2007, but there was no oxide. So despite hitting pretty good sulfide mineralization, they walked away from it. Didn't test it along strike. Didn't test it down depth.
Interesting. Okay, let's take a step back here, because the project, based upon what I'm seeing and hearing, looks extremely high quality. So let's go back to how you acquired this. What did you pay for the project? Does Cascadia own it, 100%? Are there any royalties outstanding, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, great question. Again, like we know, we've known the deposit, we know it's been there, and I think it just worked out that Granite Creek at the time, they didn't have a lot of money. They had some debt as well, and we approached, and we had, it took a long time to have and we ultimately got to a point where we agreed on combining or merging with the company, and we won't need to get into the whole details of it, but there's a little bit of debt that we settled. And then it was roughly just under 8 million in Cascadia shares for Granite Creek. The deposit itself, believe it or not, will be royalty free in 2 years, which is incredible. It was a long-standing royalty that had annual advance payments that would actually extinguish the royalty. I think it was almost 20 years, wasn't it, Andrew? So we're in the last 2 years, $100,000 a year payment, and that'll be gone. Granite Creek did a very good job of consolidating the land package, because before they consolidated it in recent years, the footprint of the land package was just over the Carmacks main deposit. So now Cascadia owns almost half of the Minto Copper Belt. So we've got a very nice land position there. So we got to make sure we talk about Zone A too, because it's a bit of a segue from the land package. So I don't know if we want to do that now, or
Okay.
any more questions about the property.
So yeah, you mentioned in one of the most recent news releases you put out on November 4th, you talked about the broader potential, along this copper belt. So tell us about some of the other targets, because this is a very extensive copper belt. I mean, obviously the property that you've acquired is quite large.
Yeah, it's amazing. You want to talk about Zone A in the regional bit, Andrew?
Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of segue a bit there. We'll skip through a bunch of slides here, but kind of building on what Graham mentioned earlier about the regional potential and the IP anomalies here. I think this is kind of one step out from the deposits. We've looked at the deposits itself. We've seen that long section where you can see all that opportunity to expand. There was work done in 2022 to do a bunch of near deposit IP. You can see on these sections here, where you get the cross sections across the known deposits. Really, really good correlation between chargeability high and sulfide mineralization. It makes sense given that contrast between the barren host rock and well sulfidized material. What's interesting here is you see these targets at depth along the IP sections. Those have not been tested. And you also start seeing kind of these lateral zones as well, which have not seen testing either. So when you look at these in plan view, you start to see, maybe there's another raft of mineralization parallel here. We can see what looks to be, other signatures out here to the right, correlating with that zone 14 drill hole. So we're starting to see the potential, around the deposit here to find a couple more parallel rafts of mineralization. Those have not been tested yet. We step out a layer further, and you've got here the 177 square kilometer property. So very, very sizable land package, all road accessible. We've been just looking at the Carmacks main deposit down here on this broader property. Now, various parts of this have been explored since the 1980s. We're combing through a ton of historical data. There's been some compilation work done historically, but a lot of it still needs to be pulled together. And a lot of the property hasn't seen modern systematic, geochemistry and geophysics work. So we're working on figuring out what needs to be done this year to advance that systematic process. But at the same time, we're finding all sorts of kind of hidden gems hiding in that historical data. And one of them that's really jumped up so far is this Zone A. It was drilled in the 1980s, 25 meters of 2% copper, almost 2 grams gold, another 23 meters of 2.3% copper, 2.2 grams gold. That work in the 1980s traced that over 350 meters of strike length. And it's seen relatively little drilling since then. I think there's a couple RC holes drilled by Granite Creek when they had the project, but it really hasn't seen proper follow-up. So that's an incredible target where you're starting to see really, really strong gold grades as well as those high copper grades in it. And you can literally drive a pickup truck right to it. So that's an incredible opportunity. We need to get out there this next year and do some follow-up work on that.
Okay. So to be clear, you completed a drill program last month and the assays are pending for those holes. Is that correct?
We put out 3 of them. There's still 8 holes that are pending. I'm just going to jump back up here. Sorry, the long section. So the black lines that you see here, those are the holes that we drilled this year. So we drilled 11 holes. We've said publicly that 10 of the 11 hit sulfide mineralization, and we've released the first 3 from the 147 deposit. The rest of them are still waiting at the lab. The only one that did not hit mineralization is the one kind of on the very far edge out here where there's just some faulting going on.
I see. Okay. And then you have a financing currently open, I believe, and that's to fund the next phase in, I guess you're going to start probably in May or June of 2026.
Yep, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's worth going over some of these pictures of the core, like, because we do have some nice holes. Like, what's really nice about this sulfide is it will float very well. The metallurgy on it is really nice, and we've got it's primarily chalcopyrite and bornite, and that's what we're seeing in like the next 7 holes. There is, we don't know what they're going to return, but we have hit copper mineralization in 7 of the 8 holes. So what's important there is that these holes, next 7 of 8, are primarily step out holes. So we are going to be looking to make this bigger. And when you get those kind of grades over those widths, you can really start building pounds and ounces. So we're pretty excited about it.
Yeah, you have some core picks in the presentation. Is that hole 40? That's pending assays?
Yeah, so we go to hole 33 first, then hole 38, then hole 40. And 38 and 40 are both pending. So 33 here, this one's out. This section that you see here ran almost 2% copper with just over a ½ gram gold. You can see really nice kind of semi-massive zones of chalcopyrite within that. Some close-ups here on the right side. Next, we've got hole 38. That's from the 1213, so the very south part of the deposit. To Graham's point about we're starting to see semi-massive bornite here in a lot of places, which is really encouraging. That carries twice the copper grade as chalcopyrite. So awesome to see a lot of that mineralization developed in this as well. And we see it kind of in these semi-massive chunks, as well as kind of foliation parallel and within the fabric of the rock itself. So to some degree supergene enrichment potentially, but there does seem to be a primary bornite component to this, which is huge because that carries a lot of grade. And at the Minto mine to the north, the bornite component is a really key driver there as well. So this one is not yet out, hopefully relatively soon, but the labs have been backed up. The Minto guys decided to drill 50,000 meters and they're shoving that all into the White Horse lab. So it's just bugging things up a little bit, but good. And then finally here from the 2000, that's that zone kind of in the middle that's seen very, very little drilling historically. And, you can see some massive zones of chalcopyrite here, semi-massive to massive. So really, really encouraging to see that visually. What it translates to in assays, we're still waiting to find out, but pretty promising.
Very good.
Yeah, maybe if we just go back to the slide of the regional there, just to really point out the access. That road at the bottom is government maintained. And then going up from that is like a logging road right out to Carmacks. And then just off to the east, you see the Klondike Highway, and that's where the power grid power is. So, I know, Robert, you've been in the Yukon a lot, and you've been on a lot of projects. I remember being way out at ATAC with you, and, the cost of drilling here is only $350 all in. It's crazy good. So, it's just, and then with that coupled with the new Yukon government and, the critical minerals from, with Carne, the feds, like, we're just in a really good position, low cost of drilling. If we're looking to double this resource, be it through the Carmacks main or adding the zone A, maybe you have a hub and a spoke, with put a couple of these zones together, get this up to 100 million tons if we can over the next couple of years. We're fully funded for 2026. Like, we're just in such a great position right now. So yeah, it's fun. It's
great.
That's
my next question for you guys is, Look, the resource that you have right now that's published is 650 million pounds of copper, 300,000 ounces of gold. How big does this need to grow to have a, I mean, the grade is there. There's no doubt the grade is there. How big does this need to be a mine?
I mean, I think the PEA says technically it could be a mine right now, but I think you want to see longer than a 9-year mine life, which is what came out of that study. The nice thing is we view that as a foundation. It tells us that the mineralization here is economic. The infrastructure is good enough to support it, to mine it economically. So that doubling is really our target. You get this thing over 1 billion pounds of copper, it gets to a threshold where people really start to notice it, where you can attract more attention from bigger mining companies. So I don't know. I don't think that it necessarily needs to be that big to make it, but that's where we think it really looks really strong and really promising. So we're not going to go in here right now and just rerun this PEA at higher metal prices. We could do that. The numbers would look even better than they did when they ran it at 425 copper. But we really think investing in that resource expansion work, do 2 years of aggressive drilling here. Then when we come out with a doubled resume, ideally, you're going to see this thing really, really shine from an economic perspective. And we did 4,000 meters of drilling this year in less than a month. It's truly incredible to work out there when you can just bring in heavy equipment on the road. Such a nice change.
So that's the plan in 2026. The drill program is going to be quite a bit larger.
Absolutely. And you got to remember this year, I mean, we closed this acquisition August 13th. We did a raise a week after that, and then we had guys on the ground the second week of September. So it's been a really quick iteration for us this year to get that acquisition done and still get out there and do almost a 4,000 meter drill program this year. So now that we've got the funding in place, we can plan properly for next year. You're going to see a much bigger program.
So is this the sort of location where you can drive up there and you have a pretty nice camp, and the drill season can start like June 1st and it can go for 4 months instead of that shorter window that we see a lot of companies do in the Yukon?
Absolutely.
We're actually quite fortunate. We're already planning for a winter program in 2026.
A winter program, so like February?
Exactly. The thing is, you can already drive in here. You can see there's
not this. Sorry, my bad. The following winter, not this winter.
Oh, winter.
My bad.
Winter.
Yeah.
Okay.
My bad. Yeah. So we're going to do a big 15,000 plus next summer, but during that we're going to get ready so that the following winter we can do some drilling in the winter.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, that makes sense.
The camp just needs a bit of upgrades. There's ACO trailers and things. It's in pretty good shape. The biggest thing is just there's a water well that they used to support winter drilling before that just silted in. So we just need to get that water well reactivated. That's the winter water supply, and then kind of good to go effectively year round, which is awesome.
Okay. And then a question about the Yukon territory as a whole. I mean, Graham, at the start of this conversation, you mentioned it's been an amazing year for the Yukon. So many gold explorers in the Yukon have had spectacular transformational years in 2025. Copper in the Yukon is a little bit less known, and it's not really been the focus, but there is a lot of copper. And another company, which is the Selkirk Copper, has just sort of gotten going here, and they're in the same copper belt. So tell us about that.
Yeah, no, of course, in the same style of mineralization, and they were running for years. So Minto's been around for a long time. The Selkirk First Nation alongside Frank Justra, the Fiore group, have put that together. And like I think Andrew said, they're doing 50,000 meters of drilling right now, and they're kind of in the same. They're looking to get that back into production within the next year or two, just like we're trying to double our resource in the next year or two. So I think you're going to see a lot of news flow. This is one of the largest. It is probably the biggest copper belt in the Yukon. Then you've got Casino to the north of this, and then Gladiator to the south. And one thing I didn't think we've talked about is, this was previously envisioned as a heap leach for Carmacks. This is the way we envision it now is going to be a milling operation, so you avoid that heap leach, which is a positive for this project. And then just with the Yukon, I think having the new Yukon party in is bodes very well for getting things on track in the Yukon. So, you know, that Yukon has a lot of tailwind, and as you know, it's a great place to work. Mineral potential is excellent.
That's right. Thanks for mentioning that. There was just an election in the Yukon, and there is a new leader in the Yukon that seems to be pro-business and friendly to the mining sector. Final question. Tell us about the share structure. Tell us about who some of the largest shareholders of Cascadia are. And I'll give you the final word if there's anything else that we need to know.
Sure. I can quickly go over this. I mean, I think we've got a very good registry here. Like Andrew said, we financed right after closing this deal in August, and that was with Mackenzie Investments. They are actually scouring North America for projects like this. There's not many, and we've known Ono at Mackenzie for a long time through the ATAC days, so he jumped right on it. We put $3 million in the till then. Hecla is there from the spin-out transaction from when Hecla bought ATAC and we spun Cascadia out. Michael Gentili, a very strong supporter, and is taking a very large position in this current financing. He's been supporting us for a long time. Barrick Gold is legacy from ATAC, and Ixios out of France is another fund that's in some of the copper names in the Yukon as well. So we've got a great registry of shareholders and strong shareholders, and we're well positioned with that'll give us approximately $6-ish million plus going into next year, so we're good to go.
Very good. Graham and Andrew, thank you for your time. Cascadia, it looks like a new and improved version of Cascadia, and we didn't even talk about Catch, which I know is a very good project by its own right, but obviously the focus here is on the more advanced stage Carmacks copper gold project. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.